The Mekong River flows through lands where people have lived and farmed and prayed for thousands of years. Beginning high in the mountains of Tibet, it flows through China, Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, providing water, fish, transportation, and life itself to millions of people. Tourists from around the world are coming here, and you can see why. I, too, found myself drawn by the beauty and a sense of adventure. I had decided to kayak the mighty Mekong River. I'm Dave Ellingson, the Paddle Pilgrim. This journey would mean paddling 500 miles in 30 days through Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam to the South China Sea. Yes, a very ambitious plan. And my friends back home kept saying, "What?" But I also found myself drawn here to wrestle with something from my college days in the 60s. Southeast Asia became the stage for a battle between the superpowers, the Soviet Union and the United States, in the Vietnam War, with devastating consequences as millions of lives were lost and the countryside destroyed. Many of my friends went off to fight. As a student, I was deferred, and I protested the war.
War demonstrators protest U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War in mass marches, rallies, and demonstrations.
These tragic events were headline news. But the Vietnam War shaped my identity in ways both large and small, and led me to wonder what this region is like today, and what its people think of Americans, and maybe some deeper questions. I had to go see for myself, so I set out to paddle through these peaceful and troubled waters. I invited 3 brave souls to join me, and I found each of us were on a personal quest. Dr. Debbie Castle is a college biology professor whose research in fire ants has led to fame as the Ant Lady. We were high school classmates back in Iowa. Debbie's brother fought in Vietnam. David Girk is a retired defense attorney. He was a conscientious objector during the war and served as an Army medic at a base in Germany. Reverend Tom Glasso is a Lutheran pastor like myself, and over the years we have shared the struggles and joys of being in the ministry. Tom's quest was very personal, as his mother was Vietnamese and his father an American who was there during the war.
So the building that I lived in, which doesn't exist anymore, was at the end of this walkway, and it was for the 8, 9, and 10-year-olds.
Tom was abandoned in an orphanage and adopted by an American family. So the team gathered, and we were off. We were fortunate to get our hands on inflatable kayaks that fit into large rolling bags. After 16 hours in the air, we were finally in Laos. We all had a fitful night's sleep, but couldn't wait to get on the water.
Everybody is up, ready, happy, healthy. It's a great day.
Thanks for doing all the work.
That's okay.
A rush of adrenaline helped us haul our gear down very steep slopes to the river. Low water and high banks. Tough kayaking was ahead.
13, 14.
My happy place, right in this kayak with 3 of the most spectacular and amazing and funny guys I've ever known. I am just loving this.
And away it go. Whoa,
We were planning to camp along the way or stay with local folks in villages, and so we were fully loaded with gear. Our goal was to paddle 20 to 25 miles a day. But the going was slow as we discovered our inflatable kayaks weren't as fast as our hardshell kayaks back home. And the river was big, with little current to help us along. The kid in me started wondering, are we there yet? As we camped on a sandbar island, we enjoyed a beautiful sunset. I went looking for water and met a woman and her son who were harvesting watermelons. Her shy smile felt like a welcome to her land. We were going at a snail's pace, and in my tent that night I began to wonder, had we bitten off more than we could chew?
Is how hard it is to paddle an inflated kayak in 100-degree temperature. Sometimes with a slight headwind, sometimes with no current. It wore me out.
We felt like joining the water buffalo as they cooled off in the river. The team's mood, however, was very positive. Lots of laughter. We were having a great time despite things not going according to plan. We definitely didn't want to abandon ship.
Anything on the river is noteworthy, and when it's 4 Americans in these inflatable kayaks that are colorful, waving at the kids, it's amazing. And I love doing that, and it's infectious. Now, I'm reaching out even more to get the joy to them and to me.
After another long day of paddling, we were exhausted. But we got a wake-up call in a stretch called the Land of 4,000 Islands.
When Dave took the lead through the rapids, I was so relieved. I've done rapids. I thought maybe I would know what to do, but every decision he made wasn't the one I would have made. It was the correct one, nevertheless, and he got us safely through here.
Rounding a bend, we were surprised and happy to see a beautiful hotel on the riverbank. A hotel wasn't in our plans, but our aging bodies needed a break. The owner, Pan Arena, became our first river angel, providing hospitality in wonderful rooms and delicious food. Pan would also guide us to the massive Kone Falls, which stretch for 8 miles across the river, the widest waterfall in the world. Our pause at the hotel brought a reminder to slow down, which can be hard for Americans who are always in a rush. This was an important epiphany, that our quest included enjoying the people, the culture, and human kindness. We needed to stop and smell the roses.
It was such a positive experience to have so many challenges. It was always a group discussion, and we worked it out. And so it never felt like, oh man, I just want to go home. I never had that feeling. It was like every day I got up and I was just really excited for the next adventure.
We faced the fact that we simply could not reach, in time, our scheduled stops along the river. We decided to pack up our gear, feeling a bit deflated like our kayaks. We needed to leave the river for the time being, and hitched a ride from below the falls into Cambodia.
We weren't able to kayak as much as we had planned, and so therefore that time kayaking was replaced with a large amount of engagement with the local people that we met. I think we are better for it.
Arriving in Phnom Penh, the capital of Cambodia, we immediately were overwhelmed by urban life. This was beginning to feel like an Anthony Bourdain adventure. We were blessed by our second river angel, an American named Philip Baker, a semi-retired Lutheran pastor, professor. Phil became our host and guide. We prayed in magnificent temples. We toured and absorbed culture in museums. We savored delicious and inexpensive food and wandered through sprawling markets. We visited a silk farm on an island. and our guide at the silk farm had lost a leg to a Vietnam-era landmine. I was surprised that he showed no bitterness, only gratitude for the opportunity to work and support his family. We were literally stopped in our tracks by our visit to the killing fields. After the Vietnam War, a terrible tragedy took place in Cambodia without much notice. A radical communist insurgency, the Khmer Rouge, led by Pol Pot, tortured and killed 2 million people in their attempt to create a pure society. We visited one of the over 200 killing fields where bodies were buried. Over a quarter of all Cambodians died. It was horrific. I was privileged to meet Chum May. He survived simply because he was needed as a mechanic to keep the trucks of the Khmer Rouge rolling. Over dinner each night, Dr. Phil helped us process our experiences. He described this genocide as having created PTSD for an entire nation. And yet, Cambodia is slowly recovering and rebuilding. Dr. Phil serves a group started by Lutherans called Life with Dignity. They focus on sustainable livelihood, clean water, sanitation, and hygiene. Dr. Phil said, "We Lutherans came 50 years ago, and we are still here." At the border, some men helped pile our gear onto their motorcycles, and we rode into Vietnam, where we were met by, are you ready for this? Dr. Phu and Mr. Hu. We were now in the vast Mekong Delta with its many channels. The Delta was the scene of many of the battles in the Vietnam War. I remember watching news reports of these dangerous waterways. Almost immediately, we had to fix a leak in Tom's kayak. We finally launched and were very excited to be back on the water, paddling by houses on stilts and people fishing. Blustery headwinds picked up and we began to dodge large barges. Dr. Phu and Mr. Hu had been following us in a trailer boat because they were worried about our safety. They came alongside and invited us to grab a hold. Like chicks pulled to safety by a mother hen, we enjoyed a speedy trip downriver. Our fun was short-lived, as the police were also concerned for our safety and ordered us to leave the river. Safely back on shore, Tom and Debbie had to dance. Our next river angel was Dr. Nguyen Minh Quang from Canto University. He and his team of student citizen scientists are researching the effects of climate change on this region. Dr. Quang and his Mekong Environmental Forum took us to visit several of their projects. They're helping people along the Mekong directly affected by climate change. Their projects include floating fish farms, and we paused there for a tickling episode. How can you top this experience? There were islands with shrimp and crab production that we toured by bike, and an ecology farm with narrow bridges we crossed very carefully. Another economic boost is ecotourism with local arts and crafts. This work includes boat trips employing women paddlers and offers tourists delicious loganberries and traditional music. Their projects are also helping revive the floating supermarkets by delivering tourists to new restaurants. We were honored to speak and engage with students in one of Dr. Huang's classes, and happy to meet these young people creating a future for Vietnam that is sustainable and environmentally responsible. Like their neighbors in Laos and Cambodia, we found the people of Vietnam were welcoming, friendly, generous, and kind. Our final days were spent in Ho Chi Minh City, formerly Saigon. Etched in my memory of the war is a helicopter saving the lives of people from a roof near the U.S. Embassy. This iconic photo became known as the last helicopter out of Saigon. We visited the orphanage where Tom had lived as a boy before coming to America. A flood of memories welled up in Tom. Several years ago, through a DNA test, Tom discovered his American father was not a soldier, but a journalist covering the war. But his mother's identity remains a mystery. Tom and I met with Tu Yuen. She helps Amerasians by hosting a local TV show called As If We Were Ever Apart. To help Tom in his search, they interviewed him for their program.
I want to find my mom because I have two boys, two little boys, and I want them to know about their grandma. But I also want to know, from my own, what my mom was like. Who was she? What got her into the position that forced her to give me up? I want to know her story, and in a way, that's my story.
Tom failed to find any leads about his mother, but is not giving up. Our final day, we toured the presidential palace. As we sat resting from the heat, children peppered us with questions in excellent English learned from watching American cartoons. We felt their fearless love, a love we experienced throughout our adventure. We then went to the War Remnants Museum. We were repeatedly struck by the pain and destruction of the American War. In the museum, I rubbed shoulders with many older American men. We were each on our own pilgrimage. They had fought, I had protested. We were all a part of a generation seeking healing, hope, and closure. As we left, we saw another sign for the museum. The museum was about the war, but dedicated to peace. Our adventure began with many questions. What was this place like 50 years after the war? What do its people think of Americans? And how will our adventure change us? Tom deepened his connection to his birth nation and his commitment to finding his birth mother. Kirk has found a people and a place which feels like a second home, and he's eager to visit again and to serve. For Debbie, this was the trip of a lifetime, and it will spur her on to make new scientific discoveries that serve all creatures. And for me, the paddle pilgrim, going down the Mekong has inspired me to rededicate my life to work for peace and justice at home and around the world. As we neared the end of the mighty Mekong River, we realized that our journey had been far more than we had planned. We had learned to stop and smell the roses, or even better, to linger with the lotuses. By the way, we made it to the South China Sea, but it was all about the journey.